ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तु ते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते राधानाथ स्वामी नामिने। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्येश्वरं। हरि ओम तत्सत्। हरे कृष्णा। So we are continuing our discussion on the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, knowledge of the absolute. We have come to a very interesting part of the discussion of the 7th chapter. 7th chapter, as we discussed multiple times, is focused on giving, like the title says, knowledge of the absolute truth. Krishna wants us to think of him, but not to think of him as a great king, not just to think of him as a great, powerful, mystic person, as a great politician, a wise man. We must remember Krishna and think of him tattvataha, as he is. Who is this Krishna? That's why in the first verse of the 7th chapter, Krishna says, Samagra mam, to understand me completely, Samagra. Yada yatha gyasyasi tachrunu. Hear from me how you can understand me fully and in truth, free from any doubt, so that you are very, very clear when you contemplate who is this Krishna that you are thinking about. What is his position? What is his glory? So Krishna starts and goes through many aspects of his position. He talks about how the various Pancha Mahabhut come from him, the mind, intelligence, false ego come from him, even the living entities come from him, the living sparks, which are all tiny part and parcels, like sparks emanating from the fire. Same in quality, but different in quantity. We are all tiny sparks. The Lord is an unlimited fire. And then the Lord explains how He's the source of both the material energy and the spiritual energy. And He is the sustaining principle of everything. Even this material manifestation, which is a combination of His superior and inferior nature, ultimately it is He who's holding everything together. So, and Krishna says this knowledge is not so easy to get. In fact, hardly anybody is even interested in this knowledge. What to speak of enthusiastically wanting to learn and understand it. Those who are actually desirous to know this are very rare. People are more interested in the sale and what best foods are available where, and when will MCO end so that I can go abroad on a holiday. These are the pressing questions which are crossing our mind. But how many of us are actually wondering, I want to understand the supreme truth. And that is actually intelligence, because having understood the supreme truth, like what Krishna says, everything becomes known. Having known which, everything else becomes known. Why? Because when one understands Krishna, one has actually understood everything. And actually, Krishna practically comes to this point towards the point where, of course, first he mentions about four kinds of devotees who approach him. Then first he speaks about four kinds of miscreants who don't surrender to him. Then he describes the four kinds of pious people who approach him. And then he declares that amongst the pious, those who have a proper knowledge of him and work towards understanding him are superior amongst that group. And Krishna says, especially he who's in full knowledge of him and who's engaged in pure devotional service is the best of all those who approach him. And such a devotee is very dear to him, and for such a devotee, Krishna is very dear. And Krishna concludes this section, verse 19, by saying, Bahunam Jarmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudevah Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. That it is not an easy thing to understand Krishna even after taking to spiritual life. Sometimes it takes many lifetimes. And Krishna mentions this point at a few places in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, at another place he says that neither the Devatas nor even the great sages, Maharshina, they also don't understand me properly, because I am their source. They are also bewildered by my Maya energy. Only those who take full shelter of me in devotional service, they are able to understand me. And those who actually understand me by taking shelter of the process of bhakti, by taking shelter of the association of devotees, eventually they come to perfect knowledge. And what is that perfect knowledge? Vasudevah Sarvam Iti. Ultimately, everything is coming from the Lord, resting on Him, going back to Him. Everything is part of Him. Everything is manifested from Him. He is inside everything. But still He is aloof and maintains His independent position. Vasudeva Sarvam is a very beautiful concept. And Krishna has mentioned this many times in the Gita and the Bhagavatam, of how Krishna is everything, but still Krishna is different from everything and has his own identity. And repeatedly across the Gita and the Bhagavad, Krishna emphasizes that this one who understands him like this has actually understood him properly. And this is very confusing for most people. They're totally bewildered. And they try, of course, in various ways to concoct some meaning out of it, but this is very difficult to understand. It's like saying, it's like, let's say I'm now sitting in a room and giving a class. So let's say suddenly I say I'm everywhere in the room. The room is me. I'm in the room and I'm also outside the room. What will you all say? He has had some overdose of some medicine. So he's talking nonsense today, because this doesn't make sense. Materially, it doesn't make sense, because materially, how it is not possible to have something like this. But Krishna says everything, and also not just that, and that the room is inside me. On top of that, Not only am I everywhere in the room and I am inside the room is inside me and I'm also outside the room, independent of the room. This is like the height of craziness. That's why it's not so easy to understand Krishna. Even the Devatas get bewildered. That's why the simple explanation everybody tries to give is, oh, God is impersonal light. It is so hard to conceive this nature of the Lord. That's why Krishna says repeatedly across the Gita that to understand Krishna tattvataha, one needs Krishna's blessings, and such intimate blessings of Krishna by which one can understand Krishna properly tattvataha are available only to the bhakta, the devotee. Bhaktya tu ananyaya shakya aham evam vido arjuna yatum drashtum cha tattvena praveshtum cha parantapa. This is elsewhere in the Gita, where Krishna says, only through unalloyed bhakti can I be known as I am. Many people understand me in different ways, but only through bhakti. Bhaktya tu means only, but only through bhakti and nothing else. Shakya means it is possible to understand me as I am. To understand me, gyatum, drashtum, to see me in this personality. And praveshtum, and to enter into the mysteries of my understanding and entering into the spiritual world. Tattvena, as it is understanding. Parantapa. Oh, great Arjuna. It's not easy. Bahunam Jarmanam ante jnanaman mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvam iti sa mahatma sudurlabha. Such a great soul who has understood this, understood my nature, understood how I am everything. Vasudeva sarvam. And what happens when one understands Vasudeva is everything? Just surrenders to Krishna. Because the natural outcome of actually understanding this is one will surrender. So if somebody says he has understood this, but he's hesitating to surrender, that means he has not understood. I know Krishna is, but I prefer to do something else. That means he has not understood. Because you cannot not surrender to the Lord if you actually understand this. Because Vasudeva Sarvam, what else can I do? He's inside everything, and everything is inside of him, but he's still outside, but he still can come inside also. So, such a great mystical existence and tattva the Lord has. Who will not fall in love with him and surrender to him? So that is the natural conclusion. That's why the greatest of the yogis are those who have surrendered to the Lord in love. That is what Krishna asserts at the end of the 6th chapter, isn't it? Yoginam api sarvesham madgate antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yuktatomo matah. And that's why this topic is so difficult to understand. That's why Krishna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, Yah idam paramam guhyam mad bhakteshu abhidasyati bhaktim mai param kritva mame vaishyatya samshaya. Arjuna, he who explains this supreme secret of my nature and of the nature of my devotion amongst my devotees to help them understand it and develop a similar understanding and mood is extremely dear to me. He becomes very, very dear to me. And I guarantee that he will achieve pure devotion. So much we become dear to Krishna when this most secret of all secrets is explained to the devotee. It is not possible to understand this any other way. It has to be understood from the devotees and through the process of bhakti, which is accompanied when properly followed by the blessings of the Lord. And having said this, Krishna enters into a very interesting section of the 7th chapter. Of course, he ends verse 19 by saying, such a great soul is very rare. What soul? He who fully surrenders to Krishna by developing full understanding of him. Now Krishna goes into that section where Krishna is describing who are those others who may not necessarily be miscreants, but who don't surrender to him. Yeah, correct? Yeah, so amongst those who don't surrender to him, there are actually 3 categories, and Krishna addresses all those 3 categories in this chapter. First category are the miscreants, Dushkrutina, which he has already discussed, eliminated. Okay? They are hopeless. They are totally, actually not hopeless. There is always hope, but they are deeply in illusion, and they have a deep sense of envy against the Lord, and that is why they don't surrender. Then another category of those who don't surrender are those who are impersonalist, which Krishna is going to address later in this chapter. Impersonalist means they think ultimately God is a light, God is impersonal, and Krishna is a temporary form that God takes, this impersonal God takes when he takes an incarnation. But actually, ultimately, God is impersonal, and I am also ultimately a part of the same impersonal truth, and I am essentially the same as God. This is another misconception, which again Krishna will defeat in a few verses' time. And a third concept or a third category of people who don't surrender to Krishna are those who surrender to other devatas or approach and worship the other devatas. These 3 who don't surrender. Okay, those who are the miscreants include the atheist, include those who are maya aparta jnana, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, those who are dedicated to material sense enjoyment and fruitive work, the mudhas, the naradhamas, those who don't want to follow any rules and regulations and simply eat, drink and be merry, the naradhama. Maya aparta jnana, the bewildered philosophers whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and those who are openly atheistic, who disbelieve in the existence or oppose the existence of God. And then there are those who say, actually, there is no God to surrender to. Whom should I surrender? I am only God. Everything is God. Everything is one. They also don't surrender to Krishna. And the third category is, well, maybe you choose Krishna. Maybe you like Krishna. You know, I have chosen somebody else to worship. It's okay. It's all the same. It's considered very fashionable. You know, it's as if, you know, you like paneer tikka masala. I like chole bhature. It's okay. You take that. I will take this. It's all the same. It's all one. As long as it nourishes the body, it's all okay. It sounds very liberal. It sounds very broad and all-encompassing. But when one goes a little bit deeper, and Krishna explains why this argument doesn't hold good, he explains this because essentially it's like going into a company and you want to go and meet the CEO to discuss something important, and somebody says, no, you talk to our watchman here who's at the guardhouse. You discuss with him. He's also employee, CEO also employee. You want to talk to our employee, no? Doesn't matter. And one thinks, yes, I'm so broad-minded. Yes, doesn't matter whether I talk to CEO or watchman. So he discusses with the watchman and comes back. I'm just giving this example. Again, this is not in any way belittling or demeaning anybody. I'm just giving this example so that we understand that sometimes arguments which seem very liberal can sometimes be actually very deceiving and sometimes even foolish, that one goes a little bit deeper into trying to understand it. One realizes that they are actually so shallow. So Krishna takes it upon himself to explain this subject because this is a subject which is so confusing to most people. What to speak from other religions? It is most confusing to even those who are from the Hindu tradition. They are also confused. So what I'm going to do is there are 4 or 5 verses that Krishna speaks about. So I'm not going to discuss verse by verse because then it will become a bit difficult to understand. So I'm going to go through the 4 or 5 verses and explain the translations to you, and then let us discuss this whole topic as a whole, probably another 20 minutes or so. So we are starting from verse 20. So 4 verses are there, 20, 21, 22 and 23, which is where Krishna deals very succinctly and very beautifully with the topic of the difference between him and the Devatas, the difference between worshipping him and worshipping the Devatas, the difference between the position of himself and the position of the Devatas. Very nicely in 4 verses. And he establishes his position. So let us see first what Krishna says according to the translation, and then we'll do a bit of analysis around it. So Krishna starts in verse 20. कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियममास्थाय प्रकृत्या नियताः स्वया. Krishna says, those whose intelligence has been stolen away by material desires, they approach the Devatas and surrender to the Devatas, and they follow the particular vidhi, the particular rules and regulations of worship of that Devata, based upon their own nature. A person has a particular nature, and based on that nature, the kind of rituals which are aligned with that nature, which are meant for that particular Devata, they are followed by them. What does this mean? Even those who worship Lord Shiva, for example, those who are in mode of goodness, they worship Lord Shiva differently. Those in the mode of passion, they worship Lord Shiva differently. Those in the mode of ignorance, they worship Lord Shiva differently by taking intoxicants and drugs. So there are varieties of worship methods even for the same deity, for the same Devata. Even for Durga Devi, for example, you can see in the form of Kali, sometimes she is worshipped in the mode of ignorance, in a ghastly way. In the form of Durga Devi, sometimes or oftentimes she is worshipped passion in a mode of passion. In certain places, she is worshipped in the mode of goodness. And this is true for many other devatas as well. So Krishna is saying, I'm just going to go through the translation so we understand the translation, then we'll discuss it all together. Those whose intelligence is stolen by material desire. So if somebody's intelligence is stolen, what does that mean? In very simple words, Krishna is saying, if somebody is materialistic, and because of his being very materialistic, his spiritual intelligence is not properly situated, he is not able to understand things as they are, then they approach the Devatas instead of approaching me. That's what essentially Krishna is saying. Okay, let's go to the next verse. We will discuss it together later. So Krishna says, what happens when a person wants to worship a Devata? How does Krishna reciprocate with them? He says, yo yam tanum bhaktah shraddhayarchitum ichchati tasya chalam shraddham tameva vidadamyaham. Krishna is saying, I as the Paramatma am situated in every person's heart as the Paramatma, as the Super Soul. As soon as a living entity, a person develops the desire to worship a Devata, to worship, one must develop some faith. One must have some faith and some determination to worship the Devata. That faith, where will that faith come from? Krishna says, I create that faith and make that faith steady so that that person can worship that Devata. So what Krishna is saying, even if somebody wants to worship the Devata, the faith necessary to worship that Devata, Krishna says, I have to give. So without Krishna giving the faith to the person to worship the Devata, one cannot worship that Devata. Krishna's help is needed. The next verse. Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas Tasyaradhanam ihate Lavate cha tata kaman mayaiva vihitan hitan. Endowed with such a faith, he worships the Devata according to the rules and regulations of the scriptures, and he obtains what he wants. Correct? Because he's worshipping the Devata for some material desire, isn't it? That was the verse 7.20. Because they are overwhelmed by a material desire that they feel that they can get this from this Devata. Why to go to Krishna for this? Krishna, he may or may not give. Better I go to this Devata and take. But Krishna says he may eventually get what he wants from the Devata, but that devotee of the Devata must understand that ultimately the blessing that he is getting from the Devata is not actually from the Devata. That blessing is actually coming from me alone. Krishna is saying. So Krishna is saying, when you want to worship, the faith I give. The method also I give from the scriptures. The fruit also I only give. And then he says, in verse 23, he concludes this section by saying, Antavattu phalam tesham tad bhavatyalpamedhasam devana devaya joyanti madbhakta yanti mamapi. That those who are not very intelligent spiritually, they worship the devatas. They don't understand that the devatas are temporary. They are also going to die. The fruits that they are giving, the blessings that they are giving are also limited and temporary. Nothing eternal can be achieved by the devatas, because the devatas, their position, their abode is also temporary. Because any abode of any devata, at the end of the day, when the whole universal existence is wound up, everything is going to be wound up, right? Including the abode of the devatas, including the devata. Everything is going to be annihilated when material existence is withdrawn by Lord Mahavishnu. And what is the maximum possible benefit by worshipping a devata? Krishna says those who worship the devatas, they can go to the loka of the devata. Worship Indra very, very nicely. What is the top thing you can achieve? You can go to Indra loka and stay with him. But is Indra loka eternal? Or for that matter, any Surya loka, Chandra loka, any loka, up to Brahma, Brahma bhonal loka punaravartino Arjuna. Mam upetya tu kaunteya punarjanmana vidyate. Right from the lowest planet to the highest planet of Brahma loka, everywhere there is birth and death, O Arjun. But only one place there is no birth and death. Having attained me, Krishna says. That's why Krishna says, in this particular shloka here in 7.23, the last line, last two lines, Devan Deva Yajo Yanti Mad Bhakta Yanti Mam Api. Those who worship the devatas go to the planet of the devatas, but those who are my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet, from where they never come back, which Krishna has already said elsewhere. Yad gatvana nivartante tad dhamam paramam mama. Having gone where one never comes back. And what about all other planets? Brahma bhona loka punar avartino Arjuna. Up to Brahma loka, the highest planet, you go anywhere, you have to come back. But yad gatvana nivartante tad dhamam paramam. But my home, my abode, having gone there, one never comes back. So in these 4 verses, Krishna has actually very beautifully summarized the whole process. So let us spend some 10-15 minutes trying to understand this in a bit more detail. Now, first thing to understand is, please understand that this is not meant in any way to criticize the devatas. The point here of this set of verses is to clearly understand philosophically what is the position of the devatas vis-a-vis Krishna. Just like we said, right? You cannot just say the CEO and the clerk and the cafeteria person and the manager are all the same. Yes. And act as if you are very liberal. No, how can I differentiate the CEO and the be very offensive? But it absolutely doesn't make any sense, because CEO is CEO because he's at the top, and the manager is the manager, the director is the director. Of course, here when I'm talking about CEO, I'm also the CEO not just as an executive but as the owner of the organization, because Krishna is not just the top executive, but he's the ultimate proprietor and owner of everything. In the form of Vishnu, he is also performing the top executive role, but ultimately Krishna as Govinda is the ultimate owner, proprietor, enjoyer of everything. So a few things Krishna establishes. Let us just be clear whether we have got this right. First thing we have to understand is, it is very important to first understand the position of the devatas. The key point that comes out from this section is that the devatas are subservient to the Lord, obviously, very clearly. They and their abodes and the blessings that they give are temporary. And even to worship the devatas and get something from them, without the help of the Lord, nobody can even worship a devata, or nobody can even get a blessing from a devata. So if somebody has a mentality where he thinks, well, I don't like this Krishna, I will go to A, B, C, X, Y, Z and get what I want. Sorry, bad news for you. No matter where you go, ultimately the blessing is going to come from him. Because at the end of the day, no matter where you go in the organization, the head of the organization doesn't change, right? You can go here, you can go there, you can go whatever. It is still his system, and there is still the same person at the top. And all others are employees. He's the boss. So you cannot, it's not an alternative government. It's like some people are so fed up. I hear many Malaysians say this. Oh, Malaysia is so bad, I want to go and migrate to another country. Of course, I think differently. I think Malaysia is quite wonderful. So I'm surprised when they think like this. So I say probably you've not spent sufficient time in India, that's why you're thinking like this. But this is the tendency. The tendency of people is they think, oh, I don't like this, so I will go to another system elsewhere. But Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Everything is under Vasudeva. The whole system is under him. It's controlled by him, is run by him, is maintained by him. He is the very substratum, the essence of everything. Where are you going to go? Where can you go that it is not him, or controlled by him, or driven by him? That is why the pure devotee surrenders to him. Vasudeva Sarvam, why should I waste my time going here, there? At the end of the day, he's the boss. So those who are understanding this tattvataha, bahunam janmanam ante jnanamam prapati, understand all the devatas are holding different positions in the universal government of the universe. They may be like ministers. Some of the higher devatas may be like ministers. Some of the lower devatas, the upadevatas, may be like some office clerk, maybe a junior manager, and various other positions that an organization needs. But Krishna says at the end of the day, the roles and responsibilities, the salary, everything ultimately is decided and empowered by the top boss only, the proprietor of the organization. Yes. Even if you try to go to the manager to bypass the top boss, the manager will say, see, I am also getting a salary. My roles and responsibilities are also fixed by the boss only. So I cannot bypass the system. I am simply placed here to do a job. The power of my position is his power. It's not my power. Correct? Yeah. For example, if I'm a director of a company, as long as I'm sitting on that chair, I'm empowered by all the powers that are given to that position, which are given by the top person in the organization, isn't it? Are those powers mine? No. I am supposed to execute those powers as long as I'm sitting on that chair. The moment I go away from that chair and somebody else comes into the chair, that person inherits the power. So ultimately, the power is coming from the top. But because the top has organized the universe into so many departments and created so many positions, so many pious, great personalities are given the roles of administrative managers of the universal affairs. And these are the various devatas. Some are in charge of the sun, some are in charge of the moon, some are in charge of the land, in charge of the oceans, the water, wind. Different are, some devatas are in charge of the eyes, the nose, the different senses. So many millions of devatas and deities are there. Ultimately, all these powers are coming from one source. And because these devatas are also ultimately living entities like us, in most cases, who have been empowered to sit in that position by the Lord, even the devatas cannot on their own create faith even in their own worshippers, independent of the Lord. Krishna says, I have to create that faith. Krishna is saying, I'm not saying. Krishna says, I am giving them the faith so that they can worship the Devata. If Krishna doesn't give the faith, the person cannot worship the Devata because he will not develop faith. Krishna gives them the mechanics of how to worship. And after worship is done, when the Devata receives that offering, actually the Devata knows that this offering is not meant for me. This offering is actually meant for the Lord. Correct? Just like you go to a company and somebody is sitting at a counter collecting money from the customers against their bills. So when he collects the money, does it become his money? No, he's collecting the money on behalf of the proprietor of the organization. And when he gives money or gives something in exchange, also he's giving on behalf of the proprietor of the organization. They are just empowered by the top boss to execute their duties in a particular way. That's why Krishna says, even when a devata gives you something, understand, ultimately it is me only who is giving. So please, Krishna is saying, he's not using the word please, but I'm just paraphrasing it like this. Please understand the devatas are not independent deities or alternate competing gods to me. They are all part of my system, Krishna is explaining. They are all parts of the universal body, the Virata Rupa, occupying different positions, playing different roles, all empowered by me. Working under me. They are also my devotees. You think you want to not become my devotee, you want to bypass me, but now what you're doing is rather than worshipping me, you are now worshipping my devotee indirectly. Of course, you don't know that, but indirectly you're doing that. Thinking that he is the Lord or he's an alternate Lord that I can go to, just like our common material mentality. I don't like this company, I'll go to another company and work there. Krishna says, I am at the top. You cannot run away from me. And ultimately, I am the most loving and compassionate. Why should anybody even want to run away from me? Why do people run away from Krishna? Of course, Krishna has already discussed the atheistic category. So we don't want to talk about them. We have already discussed that in detail. 4 kinds of miscreants who don't approach him. Then the impersonalists don't approach him because they don't want to surrender to a personality. But these people who worship the devatas, why do they go to the devatas rather than going to Krishna? Krishna has already answered that in 7.20. Kamaistaiste rita jnana. prapadyanti anya devata. They go to other devatas because of their materialistic desires. Now, while Krishna does not elaborate this point, Krishna is giving a hint here. So let us discuss this point a bit more detail. Why is Krishna saying those who are materialistic go to the devatas? What is actually Krishna trying to say? What Krishna is trying to say is, some people, of course, some people are just plain ignorant, but there are other people who think that if I go to the Supreme Lord, Krishna, Narayan, Vishnu, Ram, he may not be so enthusiastic to grant me this blessing. So let me do this. Let me try to find some other way by going to somebody else who can more quickly give me what I want. This is generally the mentality. Calm. They have some calm. Calm means some selfish desire. I want this. I want to enjoy. Whatever it is. Whether it's wealth, beauty, heavenly planets, success, removal of obstacles, destruction of enemies, whatever the desire may be, some kind of karma. And they think it is easier to go to the devatas rather than to Krishna. Why? Because Shipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Usually, now this is again a perception, and we will discuss this perception. The devatas will give me things more faster. Now this needs to be understood a bit better. Now Krishna, in many places in the scriptures, he has said that I am always very mercifully disposed towards my devotees. I love to fulfill the desires of my devotees. But still, many of Krishna's devotees complain, I have been asking Krishna for so long, but he is still not giving me. So why Krishna is not giving if he is the Lord and if he is all capable and if he is so loving? Krishna himself has explained in various scriptures. He says, even though I'm always eager to satisfy the desires of my devotees, I do not give to my devotees those things which will actually cause them more problem than good. Because Krishna is like a loving parent, isn't it? Sometimes when you go to your parents, is it that when we, as young children, when we go to our parents, is it that whatever we ask for, the parents give? Sometimes the parents will say, no. I say, no, I want not one chocolate, I want 4 chocolates. The parents say, no, only once a day, one. You cry, but still the mother and the father will not give. And then the child feels, oh, so cruel, my parents are so cruel. And then they go to the neighborhood where they meet one of the neighborhood uncle, and the uncle sees them crying, and the uncle says, what is it? I want chocolate. I want chocolate. My parents are not giving me chocolate. That's why I'm crying. Oh, never mind. I will give you, here, take 4 chocolates. I will give you 4 chocolates. And the child foolishly thinks, see, this uncle is so nice. My parents are so bad, they're not giving me chocolate. This uncle is so much better. Now, the child, because he is a child and doesn't understand, because of the childish mentality, he fails to understand that it is not that the parent is incapable of giving him, but the parent is not giving him because the parent is worried that the child will spoil his health. But the neighborhood uncle is not interested in the ultimate benefit of the child. he will give it to him based on very superfluous considerations without deeply considering what is good or what is not good, isn't it? And more so sometimes, if the child simply goes to the shop next door, takes some money quietly and goes to the shopkeeper and gives him money and says, give me 4 chocolate. Is the shopkeeper going to ask why you want chocolate? Is it good for you? Not good for you? Why you're eating every day, morning, evening, four chocolates? No. Shopkeeper will count the money, give you the chocolate. So the scriptures say the role of the devatas is something like that. You pay the price through a particular kind of worship, puja, yajna, tapa. And once you make the deposit, that payment, the goods are delivered. Whether it's good, bad, all that is not considered by the devatas. It is very transactional in nature. But with Krishna, it is not like that, because Krishna is personally concerned, being the father and mother of all living entities, is personally concerned with the welfare of each and every living entity. So sometimes people who are not mature spiritually, they tend to think that, oh, because because they're so attached to getting something, and they are thinking that maybe Krishna may not give me. Yeah? Just like sometimes the children feel, if my parents are not going to give, then they will find another route. And they go there. But in case of Krishna, Krishna says, see, at the end of the day, wherever you go, if you are so hell-bent upon getting something and you don't want to come to me, you want to go elsewhere, okay, fine, I will give you. But then, because you have rejected my role as your guardian, as the protector of your interest, you have to deal with the consequences of that. The Shastras always say that it is always best to approach the Supreme Lord rather than going to the Devatas. Akamo sarvakamo va moksha kama udaradhihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Even if one has material desires, one must approach the Lord. Why? One, if it is good for us, definitely the Lord will give. If it is not good for us, He will not give. Isn't it better that the Lord doesn't give to us what is not good for us? Isn't it actually foolish and immature to think, I want it so bad, doesn't matter, it is bad for me, I still want it? Is that actually intelligent or not intelligent? It is foolish. That's why Krishna says, foolish people think like this. Kama is rita, their intelligence is stolen away. The other benefit is that when a person approaches Krishna, because Krishna is all pure, He is the supreme transcendental Lord. When one connects with the Lord, even when one comes to the Lord with material desires, because ideally one should approach the Lord out of pure devotion only, but even if one is not pure enough to be pure in one's devotion, even if one has sarvakama is all kinds of material desire. If one approaches Krishna, gradually, because of association with Krishna, one's material desires will gradually fall away. And one will eventually forget the material desire and fall in love with Krishna. That is why Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param. Param Purush, Purushottam Krishna. Take full shelter of him with strong, intense devotional service. Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param. So you'll get purified. So many examples are there. Dhruva Maharaj, he had a material desire. He wanted a kingdom. He was not interested in the 4 toffees or even our petty things that we ask for, a good job, a little bit, a new car. Do you know what Dhruva asked for or what he wanted? Dhruva did not want a big bungalow or a BMW. Dhruva did not even want simply a big kingdom. He wanted a kingdom better, not just than his father, not just than his. He wanted a kingdom which is better than Lord Brahma's kingdom, his great grandfather. Uttanapad, the father of Dhruva, is the son of Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu comes from Brahma. He wanted a kingdom better than his grandfather. How can somebody have a kingdom better than Brahma? Because Brahma practically rules the whole world as the primal firstborn child, Swayambhu child of the Lord. That, how can you have a more bigger material desire than that? But because he engaged in devotional service of the Lord with great determination, eventually he got so purified that finally when the Lord gave him darshan and asked him, "Oh Dhruva, please ask whatever you want. I'm so pleased with your intense determination and your effort to attain me and attain my darshan, to ask for whatever you want, that I will give you what you want. You tell me what you want." And by the time that it so happened that the Lord came in front of him, Dhruva was already so purified by virtue of his devotional service to the Lord. Says, Swamin Kritartho Asmi Varam Nayache. Oh Lord, I am so intensely satisfied by attaining your darshan. Kritartho Asmi Varam Nayache. I don't want to ask for anything. I was seeking for broken pieces of glass, the form of these material desires of a kingdom, but I have attained the most precious, invaluable diamond in the form of yourself. I was so foolish. What was I chasing for? All these material benefits which are temporary and which are going to eventually perish, and even while they are there, they are just going to be a cause of botheration. But instead I have got you. I don't want anything. Swamin Kritarthosmi Varam Nayache. So beautiful. I'm just giving one example. There are many, many such examples. Dhruva Maharaj is one of the most outstanding amongst those. But if instead of going to Krishna, he had approached a Devata to attain such a kingdom, even if it was within the power of the Devata, of course, ultimately through the blessings of the Lord, to grant that benediction, he wouldn't have become purified of that material desire. He wouldn't have achieved that blessing. And see how compassionate the Lord was to Dhruva. The Lord blessed him with pure devotion and also gave him the kingdom. Sometimes some people think, oh, after all this I'll worship, then I'll become pure. Then I'll get only devotion I will get. I'll not get the kingdom. Actually, by the time one comes to that point, one will not want the material thing. One will only want the Lord, because one actually understands what is the value of what one is getting. But in one's spiritual infancy, if one foolishly thinks that, oh, I will not get that, I will just get some devotion, then please understand that the Lord will not only give himself, he will also fulfill the material desire. And Krishna has consistently done that with his pure devotees. He did that with Vibhishan, he did that with Prahlad, he did that with Dhruva. He did that with so many, practically all. Whoever approached him to ask for something, the Lord, even though at the end they didn't want it, the Lord gave him that also, plus he gave them pure devotion. That is the greatness of the Lord. Because the Lord is not interested in withholding. The Lord withholds only because he is worried that the devotee cannot handle it. But when the devotee is already become pure, when the devotee has already come to the point of realization that all these things are temporary, and the devotee is attached to the Lord with full devotion and faith, with full purity, then the Lord doesn't see any reason to withhold the material blessing, because he knows that it will never distract the devotee. Of course, this is true for very great pure devotees, yeah. But if for us, sometimes the Lord thinks that he needs to give it in a different way, the Lord may do that. But the key point is the Lord will always do what is best for his devotee. That treatment one cannot expect from the Devata, because the Devata is not your Paramatma in the heart. He is not ultimately the supreme well-wisher, is also, the Devata is also definitely very empowered, very powerful, but still not equal to the Lord as the friend of all living entities. So Krishna says here, it is best always to approach him. Because even if one approaches the Devatas and gets the blessings, those blessings are also going to be temporary. Even if one worships the Devatas and achieves the topmost result of reaching the planet of the Devatas, even that position or attainment is temporary. The Devatas cannot give one ultimate liberation or attainment of the spiritual planets. So that is why one who is intelligent always prefers to worship directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he knows that the Lord can provide one both materially and spiritually. And the devotee so much trusts the Lord that if he sees that the Lord is not giving something in spite of repeated prayers, then the devotee, trusting and having faith in the Lord, knows that this is something which is not good for me. And this has happened in many cases. Many people who have strongly wanted something, thinking that this will make them happy, sometimes when that thing has come into their life, actually it has ruined their life. Because we are so much in ignorance, we see so little, we don't know what is going to happen, we don't know what we don't know. Because what we see and what we understand is actually so small, so many millions of factors are there behind the scenes, which can create so much chaos in our life. Sometimes a person strongly attached to a very beautiful boy or a girl wanting to marry, and after greatly praying to some devata, maybe they ultimately end up marrying, only to realize that this was the biggest mistake of their life. They end up with a terrible relationship and end up separating. So was it really good that this desire was granted? So these things are very difficult to understand, but at least from the point of view of scripture, we can understand that if we go to Krishna, Krishna will always consider what is best for us. And Krishna is not even calculative. When one approaches the devatas, it's transactional, right? If you pay for 4 chocolates, the shopkeeper may give 4. If you pay for 8, he will give you 8. Krishna is not so transactional in nature. If out of love you give 1 rupee to Krishna, Krishna may be so pleased by your sincerity and devotion that he may give you blessings worth 100. Krishna is not calculative. He's not a businessman. He's a parent. He's a loving father, a loving mother. Pitahamasya jagatah dhata mata pitamaha. He's never calculative. So one is never a loser when one approaches Krishna. Krishna is always supremely benevolent towards his devotees. In your relationship with Krishna, you will always get much, 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 much more than what you put in. That much you can be very, very sure. And this is the experience of all the devotees. Okay, so actually there are many, many points here that we can discuss. I think we can go on and on, but I think it's almost 10. So I'm just going to take a pause. Maybe if there are any questions that you have, then I can answer. And then we can continue The third part, after this, Krishna explains about the impersonalist in the next two verses, 24 and 25. And then Krishna winds up the chapter after 26 by giving some summary comments about his position. Okay, so I'll stop here. Any questions, any comments? So Gangotri Mataji was asking one question: is all corruption happening in the world approved by the Lord? So Lord doesn't approve in the sense that he doesn't say it is okay. It's just that the Lord has given free will to all of us to act in the way that we desire. So free will is something very precious. Some people may say, oh, why Krishna doesn't force us to worship him? If he knows it is good for us, it is his problem that I didn't do it right, because he should have forced me to do it like this. Some people take this line of argument, but it's not like that. Because if there was force, then there is no love. Krishna wants us to exercise our free will, the most precious gift. Actually, nothing else belongs to us. There's only free will. Isn't it? Anything else belongs to us? Does this world belong to us? No. It's coming from Krishna. Does our soul directly belong to us? Is also coming from Krishna, right? But there is something about that soul which Krishna has given, which Krishna doesn't claim proprietorship over. It's the only one thing, and that is the free will, the svecha of the jiva. That the Lord never interferes. Krishna says, you are free to choose me, you are free to reject me. I will never question you for that. I will make facilities. Of course, you have to face the consequence of either based on what you decide. And I will facilitate that, because you cannot do anything without my facilitation. But that is something where I will not interfere. So if somebody says, Krishna, I don't want to surrender to you, I will say, fine. Says, Krishna, I want to surrender to you, fine. You want to forget me, also I will help you. You want to love me, also I will help you. You decide what you want, what kind of help you want. If you want the help of forgetting me, then I have created this material world, Maya. And I have created this Ahankar, which will help you forget me. But if you want to remember me, I will send you to the association of devotees, where your Ahankar, your false ego will dissolve, and your original nature as my loving servant will shine forth. So the Lord is always providing freedom. So yes, in one sense, nothing happens without the sanction of the Lord, but that doesn't mean it is the Lord's positive desire that something happens. The Lord grants the facility for everybody to act and face the consequences. Okay, any questions? Wonderful. That means everybody is very clear. So I'd just like to add one more point. That while here the Lord has explained the relative position between the Devatas and himself, please understand that the Lord is not criticizing the Devatas here. He has nowhere criticized the Devatas. They're all, if ordinary devotees, Krishna says, are appreciated by him, what to speak of the Devatas who are very great devotees. Okay, so please do not have this wrong interpretation that the Lord is criticizing the Devatas. The Lord is criticizing the mentality of the conditioned souls who think that the Devatas are an alternate God that they can go to instead of going to him. That is what the Lord is saying as unintelligent. The Lord is not calling the Devatas as unintelligent. He's calling the worshippers of the Devatas as unintelligent. The Devatas are very intelligent. Why? Because the devatas are directly surrendered to the Supreme Lord. They are not in illusion. They know, even when they give a blessing, that is coming from the Lord. And one more point, that if a devotee interacts with a devata, even though a devotee of Krishna doesn't necessarily need to explicitly worship a particular devata for any material or spiritual benefit, the devotees are not averse or inimical or antagonistic to any of the devatas. The devotees of the Lord always offer all respect to all the devatas. They are very respectful because they understand that all the devatas are empowered personalities. They are representatives of the Lord. They are parts of the universal form of the Lord, and they deserve all respect, in as much as ministers of the government deserve respect because they are representing the government. The difference is that those who are devotees in proper knowledge understand the proper position of the devatas. They do not misunderstand the minister to be the king, the clerk to be the CEO. They don't mix up. They are very clear. Who is who and what is the hierarchy and what is the relationship. So if one interacts with the devatas with this knowledge, properly understanding their position, and in that spirit, worship them, honor them, respect them, understanding them to be representatives of the Lord, then that is not considered faulty. What is faulty is to think of them as alternate independent lords, or to think that there is something that I can get from them which I cannot get from Krishna. So this is what the Lord is criticizing. Hope this explains it also. And in fact, those who worship the devatas, there are very small percentage of people who worship the devatas but without kamaistaister rita jnana, which means they do not worship the devata with material desire. So there exists a very small percentage who do like this. So those who worship the other devatas without a material desire, what is the fruit that they get? Krishna doesn't touch that particular point here, but that point is touched in the Bhagavad. I don't remember the verse very explicitly right now. I probably have to research that. I think it's in the Bhagavad or maybe another Purana. I have to research a bit, but there is a very explicit shloka where it is said that if a person approaches a devata in a pure way without materialistic desire, because the devata is a devotee of the Lord, the devata blesses that particular person and guides that particular person towards Krishna. Okay, I'll repeat this. If a person approaches a devata without material desire, when the devata becomes pleased by that mentality, the devata guides that living entity towards Krishna. Because he knows that such a person without a desire, the right place for him to go is there. Mukunda, to worship Lord Mukunda, the ultimate giver of all liberation. And this is a very well established fact. In fact, many devotees have experienced this in their own life. And many of them have been worshippers of various devatas, but because they worship that devata without any material motivation, very soon they were connected by the grace of the devata. Of course, that they understood in retrospect, to the devotees of the Lord. And in that day, they came to the right understanding of who is the ultimate worshipable object. So that is also the blessing of the devatas. So in that way, devatas are helpful if we approach them in the right way. So we never disrespect the devatas. We in fact honor them and worship them. They are great souls, and their blessings can be very beneficial for us spiritually also. But we worship them in knowledge, not deluded by material desire. Okay, so I hope that also helps. So if there is nothing else, then we will close the discussion for today, if that is okay. So thank you all very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. So we'll be meeting on Saturday, and yeah, please continue to pray. There are COVID times, and many devotees are still struggling. Today, I heard a very nice devotee from Malaysia, Mahayogi Chaitanya Prabhu and his family. They have been affected. So we are all praying for them. He's in ICU. So we also request all the devotees also to pray for the recovery for them and for all devotees all over the world, that we all remain protected. Of course, those who are sincere devotees are always in Krishna's loving care. But prayers of devotees are always very helpful in making the Lord more favorably oriented towards us. That is the point. Sometimes, of course, I'm not talking about this case, I'm talking in general. Sometimes, for example, the Lord may not be so favorably disposed towards me because I may not be such a good devotee. But if you all pray, then Krishna may think, okay, he's not so good, but they are all requesting me to be kind to him. So I will be a bit extra kind. So always the prayers of the devotees are very helpful. So please do pray, and it definitely makes a lot of difference. Sincere prayers make a lot of difference. It's a very, very powerful tool to influence. And the right person to influence is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because and he can be influenced only by love. You can't arm twist him and say, if you don't do this, this is what I will do to you. These tricks don't work with Krishna. He will simply laugh at you. Okay, so thank you all very much. Take care, stay safe. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.